This slideshow is going to answer the following question. How did the colonists go from loyal British citizens in 1763 to American revolutionaries in 1776? What happened to cause that change?
After the French and Indian War, tensions began arising between the colonists and their motherland, Britain. The Proclamation of 1763 was issued by King Henry. This angered the colonists because it prohibited them from expanding west of the Appalachian Mountains because it was considered Indian territory. Colonists, like the Paxton Boys, rebelled. They killed 20 Indians because of their dissatisfaction of the frontier. The next couple of laws passed taxed the colonists and put many restrictions on them. The Sugar Act was a renewal of the Molasses Act to raise revenues due to England's debt. It was objected because it was the first direct enforced tax. Sugar was used for many things like rum. This act regulated the exploration of resources, which reduced income and trade, which led to the reduction in the amount of currency available. Then there's the Currency Act, which restricted colonists from printing their own money. Then we have the Coring Act, which enforced the colonists to allow troops into their homes. And next is the Stamp Act of 1764. This taxed all printed materials and goods and led to the Stamp Act Congress, which was an organized group that protested the Stamp Act by organizing boycotts and other acts of rebellion.
The Declaratory Act passed by the British Parliament accompanied the Stamp Act repeal. The declaration stated that Britain authority had the right to make binding laws on the colonies. The Townshend Acts were a series of laws in 1767 passed to raise the revenue in the colonies so they could pay for their own government and be free from colonial rule. Most taxes were repealed except the one on tea. On March 5, 1770, the Boston Massacre, known as the Boston Riot by the English, was an event where 5 British redcoats opened fire and killed 5 civilians. This event is often viewed as foreshadowing the uprising of the American Revolution. The first committee of correspondence was a shadow government organized by the leaders of the 13 colonies. They came together on the eve of the Revolution and shared their plans. By 1773, they emerged as a shadow government. They encouraged colonists to live simple lives. On May 10, 1773, the Tea Act was an act the Parliament of Great Britain passed. Its objective was to undercut the price of tea smuggling into Britain's North America. Its preferences to that of the British East India Company, and were made to convince the colonies to accept the right of taxation. The Boston Tea Party was a direct action by the colonists in Boston. They were against the British government and the monopolistic East India Company that controlled the tea coming into the colonies. On December 16, 1773, after the officials in Boston refused to return 3 shiploads of taxed tea to Britain, a group of colonists dressed up as Indians boarded the ship and destroyed the tea by throwing it into the Boston harbor. This incident was an iconic event in American history.
After the destruction of the Boston Tea Party, the British Parliament passed a series of laws known as the Intolerable Acts in 1774 relating to Britain's colonies in North America in response to Boston's actions. The overall outcome of these acts placed Massachusetts under a martial law that outlawed town assemblies and inflicted a curfew among the citizens. Obviously, these acts angered the colonists. In response to the Intolerable Acts, 12 of the 13 colonies met in September of 1774, known as the First Continental Congress. During the meeting, they discussed ways to boycott the British trade and publish a list of rights. During this meeting, they also scheduled the Second Continental Congress for the following year. Next came the Battle of Lexington and Concord, were the first military engagements of the Revolution that took place in April of 1775 between Great Britain and the British North America, and resulted in the colonial victory. When the Second Continental Congress came around in May 1775, The colonies sought ways to become independent, leading to the adoption of the U.S. Declaration of Independence the next year in July 4th, 1776. By raising armies, having authoritative strategy, and appointing diplomats, and having formal treaties, the British colonies became the independent nation we know today as the United States of America.
Thomas Paine's Common Sense was a book that advocated the colonial independence, which is what he stood for. Patrick Henry explained that there was corruption in the government, and he gave his famous speech, "Give me liberty or give me death," with Thomas Paine and Samuel Adams. And then Samuel Adams was an unsuccessful businessman and a politic that joined and helped lead the American Revolution against the British Parliament due to the British taxing British American colonists without their consent. John Adams persuaded Congress to declare independence from Britain, and Benjamin Franklin was known as the first American because he campaigned for American unity and was one of the first ones. And Thomas Paine wrote as mentioned before, wrote the Common Sense. And the Sons of Liberty were a group that stood for American independence. And in 1775, the American Revolution broke out, which later led to the creation of the United States of America.
That was like